Hello and welcome back to Tinker Talks Guns. Today we are going to be talking about the Kolb Baby Hammerless, a truly tiny revolver, one of many truly tiny revolvers, popular in the late 19th and early 20th century. These were manufactured by Henry Kolb, and he seems to have gone into the gun business somewhere around 1900. Details are sketchy. And this seems to be a version of the Colombian firearms manufacturing Baby Hammerless. And there is some indication that he actually purchased the tooling and the model from them to go into manufacturing on his own. In the fullness of time, his manager, R.F. Sedgley, purchased the company and introduced it as the Sedgley Baby Hammerless, which is virtually indistinguishable from the original gun. There were some improvements over time, some new patents, but it is generally held that this model was introduced around 1910 because it has a 1910 patent on it. And we're going to have to go to the tabletop to look at this one because it is small. So previously we've looked at the A. Francati Velo Dog in 25 ACP, which is remarkably small. The Kolb Baby Hammerless in 22 short is significantly smaller. It's hard to tell with them stacked one above another because of the angle of the camera, but as you can see, it is genuinely smaller. The guns from Kolb were based on an earlier design, and they are very simple and really quite well made. You can see here, if I can get the focus right, there's the patent, April 1910, Baby Hammerless, and you can see the other markings. Not really relevant. The biggest change between this and the Sedgley, as near as I can tell, is the markings, but that's neither here nor there. This is a folding trigger design. Let us first off unload and show clear, which we do by depressing this lever on the side of the cylinder axis and withdrawing it from the gun. This is also the ejector rod. Then the cylinder comes out quite easily. As you can see, it is a 6-shot revolver, and really very, very simple. There's no provision for ejection, of course, because you use the ejector rod. So we are definitely unloaded, and this is not a gun you're going to load by accident since you have to dismantle it. So from this point, all you would do is pop the trigger down and you're ready to go. It does not provide much of a grip, but it's enough because it's not like there's any recoil. There is a typical half-round front sight and absolutely no rear sight, which makes this a very short-range proposition indeed. So, let's put some expended cartridges in it. First of all, here is the standard 22 short. It is itty-bitty. Let's put some unloaded cases in there because this is a rimfire, and you don't want to dry fire a rimfire because the firing pin can hit the cylinder and damage one or both of them. So 6 empty cartridges, cylinder in the gun, and axis pin in place. So the trigger pull is not light, as you really wouldn't want it to be, but it is remarkably short. The total trigger travel is about ½ an inch. And it's reasonably smooth. If there were sights, I expect it would actually be possible to hit something with this. As it is, I fired a number of shots at 5 yards and was unable to hit the steel with any of them. So, long-range accuracy was not its strong point, as you would expect. And it has mother-of-pearl grips. And aside from taking the cylinder out, I am not going to take this apart any further because it's a solid frame and you have to fish all the parts out and put them back through a really inadequate space. And I am just not up for it. But guns like this were quite popular. And they seem to have fulfilled a function. Anyway, as I said, this is a quite well-made pistol. And very nicely finished in nickel. And, yeah, the sort of thing that would have adorned the purse or pocket of middle-class persons prior to World War I. The 22 short is not anyone's idea of an effective self-defense cartridge. So why would you put it in a revolver like this? To modernize it just doesn't make sense. The thing is, this was not a gun introduced in the modern era. This was introduced at a time when even nice European cities had levels of violent crime we would find frankly unimaginable today. But those criminals were similar in one respect. They're looking for a score, not a gunfight. And virtually any gunfire is going to drive them to flee. It's not universal, but by and large, it's true. And this was also a time when the use of antibiotics was at best in its infancy. And getting shot was serious. A 22 short, even from a gun this small, is going to produce an injury that could kill you 3 days later from an infection. Also, 22 short, even from a gun this small, is capable of killing. Not to mention that a face full of them at point-blank range is pretty much likely to convince virtually anyone to reevaluate their life choices and perhaps withdraw to consider them. So they weren't useless, but they weren't a good self-defense option. But again, context. You have to understand that while violent crime was at unimaginably high levels to the modern person, it still wasn't that likely. It was only worth, for the average person, it was only worth giving so much time and attention to the issue of self-defense. A lot of people carried a handgun on their person, but again, in context, they considered it unlikely they would need to use it, and in most circumstances, even producing and firing it would be sufficient regardless of its caliber. So, it's not a great way to look at things. It's not a great way to do things. But it is the way an awful lot of people looked at it and acted. And very small guns were enormously popular. So, it is what it is. The Kolb, and later the Kolb Baby Hammerless, and possibly the Columbia Manufacturing Company's Baby Hammerless before them, were reasonably popular. You can see them quite frequently on Gunbroker. They tend to sell for between $120 and $300, depending on condition, details, phase of the moon, day of the week, coin flips, I don't know. Prices are all over the place, and there's no really good explanation for it. But they are available at modest to easily obtainable prices. Now, I will say that while this was a well-made gun in its time, they're over 100 years old, most of them. Springs have weakened over time, things have happened. This gun had trouble igniting modern brass-cased rimfire ammunition. And you're likely to encounter the same thing, and repair parts were, 20 years ago they were fairly readily available. Today, not so much. So, if you fancy one, it's worth getting as a curiosity, and it's not going to break the bank. But for the love of God, don't count on it in any sort of situation where it matters. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and if you feel moved to, comment in the comment section, because these are the only ways that YouTube notices I exist. Also, this channel is not and never will be monetized, because guns and YouTube. So if you want to support my efforts, I would very much appreciate you doing so There is a link to my Patreon account in the description below. So stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you again real soon.